Hi guys, and welcome to the second part of the review of the iDoon Golden, or the review in itself, separate of the FIIO JadeAudio Q11 portable DAC and headphone amplifier. I just wanted to first of all say that the unit was supplied to me by FIIO, and I thank them for that. And that doesn't in any way mean that I will be biased in what I'm about to say. Anyway, that's the external sleeve. Very simple, some writing, nothing really special. Inside of it, we have got then the actual main box in itself. You open it up, it's got the little sleeve that holds the unit, okay, and then another secondary, let's say, box which holds the quick start guide with all the specs and so on in various languages, and then as well the cables and accessories that are supplied. We have a Type-C to Apple connection. We have Type-C to USB, some accessories to actually hold the unit to the back of your phone, Type-C to Type-C. So in that aspect, as is always the case with at least all the products that I have tried of FIIO, they make sure that accessories are covered and there's nothing missing. As for the unit itself, it's an all metal unit, as you can see, all metal, a little bit of a plastic finish over here, kind of a perspex thing going that allows you to actually look at the unit when it's working. Beautiful, as you can see. Okay, a little bit on the weak side. I would have liked something a little bit more solid, since it is plastic, just a little bit more solid. But anyway, that's a little nitpick of mine. There's nothing really wrong with it. And then it's got a little light back here where the connection is done, and that light obviously is an indicator for the sampling rate being used. Okay, if it's blue, sampling rate is 48 kilohertz. If it glows yellow, sampling rate is above 48 kilohertz. As for the rest of the, let's say, specs of the unit itself, it supports a 2600 milliamp ampere battery, which allows for supposedly about a 13-hour battery life. I used it the first time around and I got roughly about 10 hours, to be honest with you. So I'm assuming the battery wasn't fully charged. It's now been charged the second time, and I've been using it today for a good 8 hours and it's still going strong. The volume button works as a power button as well. It's got a nice solid click to it. Okay, it's got a nice solid movement on it. The only nitpick is that when you start putting up the volume, you notice the volume on the right side comes up first and then the left. Very minimal, but you notice it. Okay, gain switch. See, there we go. Gain switch, high and low. Oops, other way around. There you go. Gain switch, high and low. Okay, oops, come on. There you go. Balanced output 4.4, 3.3 single-ended. And that's it. I mean, it's solid, it's well built, it's well put together. The usual, that would be expected from FIIO, and above all, it's got a crazy price. I mean, we're talking $99 for all of this, which begs the question: how do they do it? I mean, you've got dongles which are costing way more than that, and don't necessarily offer more than this in terms of the sound. So that's a question that will get your minds going there. In terms of its power output, we're talking about, well, according to the literature supplied by them, we're talking about 165 milliwatts at 32 ohms on the single-ended side, and 650 milliwatts at 32 ohms on the 4.4 balanced output. What I can say is I tried it out with a couple of IMs, and I tried it out as well with some headphones that I have, and honestly, no lack of power with any of the stuff that I tried it. Even with the planar stuff, HE400 I've got, and no issues whatsoever. It has more than enough to drive them to more than loudness levels that you will normally use, or at least for sustained periods of time. Inside, what do we get? We get a dual Cirrus Logic 43198, and the funny thing with this is, the more I listen to the Cirrus Logic 43198 DACs, the more that I start being enamored by how they are implemented. At least the ones that I have heard so far, I've liked the implementation of that DAC very much. Actually, just before I carry on to that, on that aspect, let me just compare you here. The size of the, actually let me put it this way. Okay, that's the Q-Style M15 compared to it. That's the iBasso. That's the FIIO. Okay, and then over there, I think it's easier to TK2, XT5, NX7. So it's kind of an intermediate size, let's put it that way. As I was saying, going back to the sound aspect of things, the more I listen to the Cirrus Logic 43198 DAC chips, the more I start realizing that they are truly special, that they have this magic about them, which is quite intoxicating, let's put it that way. And what do I mean by that? Without wanting to sound like I'm trying to shill something or anything. For me, the same way as with IEMs, I like an IEM to be tonally correct, to have a correct timbre tonality, to, as long as that is on the dot, then I can live with if it's warm, if it's bright, if it's analytical. I can live with that, obviously within certain reasonable limits. But tonally and tonality and timbre for me has to be correct. It has to be to my liking, even if it's colored. But it doesn't matter. It has to be to my liking. And I've heard many IEMs where that is done in a manner that, perhaps it's colored, but it's so well done with the rest of the frequency spectrum, or rather, the way that the rest of the frequencies do, or the way the frequencies actually do that timbre and that tonality, it's so well done that it's pleasing. It's nice, The same thing applies to DACs. There are DACs. There's a certain, let's say, characteristical sound that usually DACs will have in terms of their implementation or overall signature. AKM DACs usually sound more on the warm side. ESS DACs usually more on the clinical side, and the Cirrus Logic as well, usually more a little bit on the clinical side, kind of an in between. I don't want to complicate this because I know this is a topic which generates a lot of controversy when we talk about this. So it's kind of like the cables. So let's just leave it at that. What I will say is that, for example, that base characteristic added to the fact of how that will kind of dictate of how neutral that DAC is. Let me see if I can explain that a little bit better. The Q11, the thing that straight away surprised me about it, and it surprised me, and at the same time it didn't surprise me, because when I saw it had a 43198, I kind of expected straight away the same kind of performance that I got from the FIIO, and the FIIO absolutely just blew me away. Okay, it's got this very neutral, this very uncolored, just very linear, very balanced sound. Okay, what comes in is what comes out. It doesn't add its own flavor. It's not like it's being equalized. Okay, and then you connect up an IM, and obviously that IM will be affected by that basic signature that the actual unit has. And what this translates is, if it's neutral, if it's transparent, if it's uncolored, if it's linear, if you connect an IM like the iDune, which is an IM which has a more reference neutral kind of sound, that is what you will get that from here. If you connect the UME2, for example, which has a more warmish, neutral Harman kind of sound, that's what you will get. So this doesn't add any flavor to it, and that's the same kind of thing that I got from the Shio. The Shio very much gave me that. For example, and to kind of make my point about it a little bit more clear, what I'm trying to say by that is the SFXI from Creative uses a AKM chip, and I'm guessing it's the way that it's been implemented and the fact that it's been probably done more towards usage of gaming and so on. You do notice definitely that depending on what IEM you connect to it, it's added its own flavor. You could argue as well that perhaps it also has to do with how the output impedance of the unit interacts with the impedance of the actual IEM being driven. That could also be a valid point of let's say doing this to the sound. But definitely when I use this AKM application here on the SFXI, and mind you, I really like this little dongle. I do notice some of my IEMs just sound like, for example, the iDoon. I connected it briefly when I was now doing this, and it still sounds clinical. It still sounds all the detail and everything's still there, but it just sounds just a little bit closed down as compared to, for example, to the Q11. If I connect the M15 to the iDoon, I get the same thing as I got with the Q11. So everything, what this was intended to be able to do and play, comes through perfectly. This doesn't add anything to it. This doesn't add anything to it. This somehow kind of detracts a little bit of the upper hand. It just warms it up a little bit more. Maybe for some people that would be an ideal situation. It doesn't bug me either, mind you. But that's just to try and set the stage for what I'm trying to say about what the Q11 is all about. So the Q11 has got very much a lot of the characteristics that seduced me about the Shio. So it's got that, that transparent sound, that it's not over analytical, it's not overly bright, it's not overly warm. It's just right there, very much like the Shio. It's just perfect. It just plays everything flawlessly. There's no added boost on any part of the frequency range. In my opinion, well, like I said, it's the main characteristic that I look for, is for it to be neutral, and in that aspect, it's done it perfectly. What that basically then means is that if something is, let's say, how can I explain this one? This is difficult to explain. I'll use another example. The TK2, for example. I like the TK2. The TK2 is really nice. But the TK2, and I'm guessing it's down to the fact that of the usage of the ESS DAC amps, DAC chips, it's too clinical. And sometimes with some IEMs, it takes away a little bit of that correctness or that real signature that the IEM has. Like, for example, if I use this with the KZ-PR1 Pro, the KZ-PR1 Pro is an IEM which has got loads of detail up top, loads. It's got plenty extension. It's a fantastic little planar. Over here, it just makes it sound excessive. Okay. However, when I use my Shio with my NX7, and basically the NX7 is the only thing it's doing is adding power, it sounds perfect. The PR1 sounds absolutely spot on. When I use it with the M15, again, spot on. If anything, the M15 will actually show or be able to show off some of the unpolishedness of that high frequency reproduction of the PR1. But that then it's just, I mean, this thing is an absolute beast, period. I mean, that's it. So what am I trying to say is that the FIIO is able to do that. It's able to be very correct, very capable of showing if an IM is musical, if an IM is warm, if an IM is bright, but it doesn't add anything to it. Again, I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but I'm just trying to, convey that the thing that really, really impressed me about the Q11, as was the case with the FIIO, is how clean, neutral, how analytical it's still capable of being, but it's an analytical that it's not cold like on the TK2. It's an analytical that has got the right amount of musicality to confer the Q11 just this really nice, very pleasant sound to it. I guess that basically covers it. In terms of some other features that it has, I mentioned it's got the gain switch. I didn't really notice any real difference. Although I have to admit that I preferred listening to it in the low gain setting. I've got it actually in the high gain setting because I left it here, but I prefer listening to it in the low gain setting. I can't really explain why. It just sounded a little bit quieter. It's a very minute difference, but it just sounded slightly quieter. So yeah, that's basically it. I mean, it's I think that the biggest plus point that it has here is that you are getting an implementation of the 43198, which has been very, very well executed, but you've been given that extra power that, for example, you don't get on the implementation of that same Cirrus Logic on the FIIO, or that you don't get as well on the there's a J Kelly that also, here it is, the J Kelly that uses the same thing. So in effect, what is this? What is this? You could say that this is my Frankenstein. It's basically what I usually do is I take the dongles and I connect it up with the Frankenstein to be able to get a bit more power out of them and be able to power things, with a little bit more dynamic range. And that's what this offers. It offers a fantastic dynamics to the whole thing by giving it, by knowing that the fact that you have got more power there available, you never run the risk of cutting things short or start coming to a point where you start having possible distortions or nothing. It's something that is kind of at least in car audio, I used to do that myself. I always wanted to have more power on my amp side than what I actually knew my speakers could handle. It just allowed me for more dynamic range, and I could have things kept to what the speakers were able to handle, and not run into the risk of clipping the amplifier and that bringing out distortion, and would ultimately destroy the speakers. And that's kind of the advantage I see the Q11 having over the smaller dongles, is the fact that it's got all this extra power here will allow it to play things a little bit louder than normal. Be careful with your ears, but without running the risk of running out of gas too soon. That's my opinion about it. Anyway, guys, I don't want to carry on about the Q11. It's a fantastic little fantastic portable DAC amp with an unbelievable price of $100. I mean, it makes way more sense to get this than to get the iBasso or to get the J Kelly, even to a certain extent the FIIO. I mean, this is $70. This is $100. Kind of, you got on battery here, 13 hours of possible listen time. This is a hard one to call. And then if I compare it to things like the G5, I mean, does the G5 offer double the performance of this at double the price? No, not really. I think FIIO has hit the nail right on the head with this one. They've put together a very well executed product, and at a price point that just cannot be beat. I mean, it's really very difficult to be able to find something, at least I do not know of anything out there in the market right now that has got the same kind of price and is able to offer the same kind of performance. So yeah, that's it, guys. In a nutshell, this is very much very much a portable DAC amp that gives the performance of the FIIO or the performance to a certain extent of an M15. I'm not saying it's the same performance, but it's the same kind of performance, just with more power, and obviously with the advantages of having its own battery and so on and so forth. All right. Anyway, as always, any questions you might have, please feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to answer. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.